So you moved away from Portland a while ago, right?
Hmm.
You're in
Yeah.
Austin because I was out there, and when I was at On It last time doing Aubrey's podcast, I saw your new business next door.
Kuya.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thanks, man. It's been a beautiful labor of love and excited to finally see her out in the world.
I bet. Yeah. So how long's that been open, and what are you all up to there?
We have been open right about 4 months, and we offer what I would describe as transformational medicine. So it's a bit of the combination of hardware sciences and software sciences. So performance medicine, regenerative medicine, in the same kind of like up leveled functional medicine into a bit more individualized performance orientation, neuromodulation with that kind of orientation to like functional neurologic and mental capacity being up leveled,
Mm-hmm.
hardware sciences, software sciences on the side of like mind, along the deeper aspects of mind, subconscious material, bringing it into the light of awareness, core traumas, the relational aspect of the heart, and then the soul. And the soul being that aspect of psychedelic therapy that allows the soul to speak.
So aside from the functional medicine stuff, are you doing are you doing ketamine therapy? I've heard. I'm sort of saying this to help the listener know, but you're doing
So,
ketamine therapy. But what? Tell me about like the stuff that works with the soul there, or how you see that, or
yeah,
sort of everything do that.
yeah, for sure. So, ketamine therapy, I'd put in both of those camps. It's a hardware technology and a software technology because it's really good neurologically and it's really good psychologically. And if we're talking about aspects of the soul, I would describe this whole process that we're in the midst of, this like combination of hardware and software sciences. Formally, I would describe that as transformational medicine, but the approach and how it's practiced is as a soul-centered therapy. The soul being that part of our lives that animates us into the world and was the blueprint that we came in with when we were born, and that aspect of ourself that's always orienting towards our highest good and our greatest fulfillment. Sometimes it's a little hard to listen because the ego gets in the way. And psychedelic therapies, which ketamine is classically not a psychedelic, it's more of a dissociative. But when we use it in a psycholytic process, and that's how we do ketamine differently than most other centers, is you can actually start to engender this altered state of consciousness and surf the realm between full lucidity day to day, kind of just walking around the streets, and then like dream state anesthesia, which ketamine can get you to. We're surfing the sweet spot in the middle. So a person has an altered state, they're able to engage the ketamine experience as this doorway into the subconscious, and then we can use that to see what's deeper into that aspect of soul.
So you're doing it in a sort of psychotherapy format with therapy involved, or is it more just the medicine on its own? Because I know a lot of centers, it's mostly focused on delivering the medicine itself,
Right.
and not as many are where the actual center delivering medicine is also offering some kind of therapy at the same time, or even it's usually separate.
Yeah. Yeah. Ours is that way. We're heavily oriented towards the psychotherapeutic process because we want to help people wake up and not just go to sleep. And it's not to make that approach to ketamine therapy wrong, because IV ketamine therapy, when you use high doses and you essentially put people into a close to anesthetic kind of arena, or at least a deep sleep state, oftentimes people will wake up and feel renewed, but there's not any material to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more convenient because you can have people have typically a net positive experience, and you don't have to deal with all the trauma underneath, right? So it's kind of convenient. It's a really easy model. You can have a big group room with other people going through a similar experience. And if you use lighter dose, IV can be done that way too, lighter dose, or injection.
Yeah.
Then you're surfing this sweet spot where the person can actually engage consciously in their process, and we have a really sweet medicine music journey suite that
Oh,
we
oh, do you?
yeah
I'll have to ask.
Parongi and Amani. guys that you know really well, worked with us to script this suite of medicine music specifically for ketamine sessions. And we have 4 albums that we put people through this deep transpersonal process of the arc of a transformational experience. So it has a beginning, middle, and end, kind of like a journey would do,
How long are they?
right at an hour.
An hour. Did I tell you about Journey Space? This I'm making music basically for this, but it's sort of like it's an interesting hole for me. How a lot of I mean, you're a bit unusual in that a lot of centers and a lot of therapists, and certainly even in the larger, broader conversation of the psychedelic revolution, isn't talking so much about the experience itself and maybe how that relates to music and ceremony and ritual as part of that.
Mm-hmm.
We're thinking a lot about legality and somewhat access and effectiveness, but
Mm-hmm.
we're not thinking so much about the experience. And for me, it's largely driven by music and guided by music and the actual experience, often, not always. And so people have been using my music, but I wanted to find a way to create more and offer like more specific tools, kind of like what you're talking about, what they made,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot more of it and more. It's sort of like an exclusive little library that's always growing. We can
Mm-hmm.
bring in other artists as well, but to be used as a tool. You just press
Absolutely.
play, and it takes someone through the whole thing from beginning to end. Because I think a lot of places, unlike yourself, they don't have any. Maybe they
Mm-hmm.
don't even know. Like I don't know. I want to get into this. I want to help people, but I don't really know how to guide the actual experience.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an easier way to do that.
Yeah, yeah. I think, and it's great that you're in this arena, man. I figured you were. I haven't. It's been a while since you and I spoke last, so I
Yeah,
figured
yeah.
since we'd spoken last, you were in this. I knew you were already in this arena, but I didn't know you were specifically lacing music for ketamine journeys. And ketamine is unique. It's a unique molecule. Historically, it's not been my favorite psychedelic or altered state tool to work with. My background is in ayahuasca and San Pedro, and I saw ketamine as this synthetic dissociative, and like, why would I want to use that?
That's what I thought too. Yeah. Yeah, I had the same feeling.
And then when I recognized that's a pretty strong prejudice and bias, and what's that about? And oh, can I give it a test drive, and can I just see what's here? Because
Yeah.
all medicine has their place at the table when we know when to use them for a given person at which time in the larger suite of everything else they're doing. And when MDMA and psilocybin become legal, like how do we know when to use each of those? That's the skill and the
Yeah.
alchemy that's rising through all of this work. And the music suite, in my experience with ketamine, is the most important with that medicine, because with ketamine, you're really locked in and you're so deep. With most other medicines, you're out and it's a more interactive landscape. But with ketamine, you're really internal. And the music's kind of, in a way, all you have, especially if you're blindfolded.
Preaching to the choir. Yeah. I mean, I'm from the psilocybin space. That's what informed my music and my work, my creativity. And my partner Rada started leading ketamine at a ketamine clinic here in Boise, and
Mm,
doing small group sessions. So I had actually, that's the reason I had a first row seat to it, because I actually joined the group, and then she was doing these multiple times a week. So I had a great testing ground for music I was working on for
hmm.
psilocybin guidance. But it turns out if I did small changes, it worked extremely well for her sessions. And we had a lot of real world testing to do. So we should, I'll get you some access to Journey Space. We're launching it really soon in beta, and you can try it out, see what you think.
Cool. Yeah, man. Happy to.
But yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about this music and ceremony aspect. What are you finding are ways that we can bring in elements of ritual or ceremony that makes sense to the broadest group of people? Sort of it's appreciation, hopefully without too much appropriation,
Hmm.
but still, mostly it's about being effective as opposed to
Hmm.
just saying nothing. Like, we're coming in, here's your medicine. Hey, I'm here for you if you need me. Here's
Hmm.
some music.
Hmm.
Have you found anything has been really key or not?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, 100%. Thank you for asking the question, because it is an intentional process of getting in touch with the deepest aspects of ourself.
Yeah.
And and
Very vulnerable.
that's very vulnerable. A high degree of opportunity for personal discovery, and that's every bit of an intention that we take into any other ceremony. Like,
Hmm.
help me open up to the greatest aspect of my own being, help me understand and see the things that I'm not able to see on my own, help me to open up into a vulnerable space if I trust my facilitation, trust
Yeah.
that guidance, to unlock areas that I'm not able to access on my own. I mean, this is deep work, and that's why I would call this soul work. And ketamine can do that. All medicines can do that, and altered states can do that. And there are a lot of ways to engage in altered state of consciousness outside of the day to day ego kind of construct. And so when we bring in intention, like you're describing, I typically am pretty front and center with what I believe is opening up into these deeper waters and greater landscapes, this aspect of soul. And we don't talk about soul, and even our just common languaging much these days. It's changing more, it's changing quickly, which is helpful. And particularly in medicine, we don't talk about soul at all.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like also almost,
The
an
soul has
anathema.
baggage,
It
pun
does.
intended.
Totally. And yet, when we look at all of the ancient medical traditions that have stood the test of time, they each had a conversation and some kind of discussion about the importance of engaging the aspect of soul. And so we're reclaiming that. And that's what Kuya stands for. That's what our kind of medicine, consciousness, personal development process stands for. So I'm typically onboarding people with that conversation of being able to open up in trust and transparency, and in faith and availability to these deeper waters, and let's get radically curious as we're going to allow the ego to softly step aside and then see what wants to be revealed. And however a person chooses to bring in their own prayer, their own intention, but also that has more of a reverential component. Sometimes it's religious based, sometimes it's non denomination spirituality, sometimes it's simply a desire to be in touch with something greater than the known kind of self, the small self. And then with that kind of intention, now we've created ceremony. And once we create ceremony, we start lacing it with a little bit of ritual. And that might be lighting of a candle, setting that intention before receiving the medicine. I'm always offering a mantra and a prayer we do IM sessions in our clinic. We find that the IM works really well because it gives a deep reset to that default mode network where the ego lives in a pretty
Yes, it can. I only laugh because I got destroyed by my first IM, and I was like, whatever. I've mentioned it many times on the podcast, but it can be quite powerful. Yeah. And
yeah.
fast.
Yeah, and fast and deep and strong. So there's a sweet spot in the dosing, which you're talking about.
Now I know. Yeah.
Right. And so when we're offering the medicine and we're praying it up, so to speak, like we would pray medicine up in any ceremony, then now you have these aspects of ritual that don't necessarily have to be the exact calling in of the four directions, or dusting off with sage or palo santo, or a variety of other ceremony, like typical ceremonial practices and ritualistic practices that I'm familiar with, and is kind of the earliest stage of my training in these more like shamanic arts, so to speak. But I found that if we bring in some of these just basic elements, and it can be as simple as honoring the basic 4 to 5 elements in our own psyche: earth, water, air, fire. And our psychotherapeutic rooms have each of those elements. We've laced all 5 of our therapy rooms to be elemental in that regard. So we have an earth room, a fire room, a
Mhm.
water room, an ether room, etc. So when we're honoring those elemental forces, now we're creating ritual and we're creating ceremony. So I think your point's a really good one, and that's this acceleration of medicine today, where we're bringing these ancient wisdom traditions and we're giving them a contemporary flavor that's not too rigid and denominational, and people can still put their own influence in their own voice and their own like power behind it.
Well, I think that's important that they anyone can bring in what's relevant, important, their own history if they have any they're connected with. So it's
Mhm.
a little bit more of an open canvas, a little bit of paint by numbers. It's like, well, we have these different colors, and this you can kind of do whatever you like in here too as an invitation. Some people might have traditions that aren't relative to you and I, two white guys, bringing this to the table. It's like, yeah, that's of course welcome.
Mhm.
It's really about bringing in meaning, and that is done through the element of choice. I mean, ceremony becomes what it is, having any depth, because essentially you say it does. Like you have, that's all. It's this acknowledgement that this is a deeper experience or something supernatural about it, and
Mhm.
you make it so by choosing that.
Mhm.
The opposite of it would just be this apathy of just walking into the experience and being like, I don't know. I don't even know why I'm here. I don't know. I
Mhm.
want this to be ordinary, so I'm not even going to
Mhm.
bring anything extraordinary to it.
Mhm.
Uh, you might get your ass handed to you, but it's also like, I think a lot of, for me, the reverence comes from just humbleness of being through the
Right.
fire. Where it's like, I see, I'm seeing, and that only has to happen hopefully once, a long time ago, maybe twice. And um, but I do think this is a really interesting conversation. You're a bit unusual from your own interests and predilections, but you're right. The medical model is so intentionally secular. I mean,
Mhm.
science is to a point, right? They don't want to since be diluted by something they feel they can't measure in that way. And so now when we bring something, it is so deeply psycho spiritual and personal and vulnerable, and we bring that into a medicalized model, it's not wanting or talking about something it doesn't really have any language for anyway.
Mhm.
And music's a great example because that's not something that's very difficult. It's very difficult to measure. So they're just like, how do we study which music? There's infinite kinds, right?
Mhm.
So it is part of the vanguard of a lot of
Mhm.
this work, and I can't imagine there are a whole lot of clinics such as yourself that are doing it in like a very professional way, very commercialized way, but still
Mhm.
thinking about these things.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there are very few now. I think that's going to change.
Yeah,
For example, through these kind of conversations and podcasts, through your music getting out there further and wider, Parongi and Amani, John Hopkins, there's some amazing music that's now being more and more widely available, and the clients themselves will demand it. And if the clinics don't offer it, then they'll be required to after a
right.
while because the clients themselves will start knowing that that's available and they'll start demanding it themselves.
Yeah. And you're finding that 1 hour is enough for you, huh? It's versus, I mean, imagine door to door when they come in, leave, it's longer than that. Or what do they do when they're coming down? Because some people have longer experiences.
Yeah, our sessions, our entire CAP session is 2 hours.
Okay.
So person comes in, if I'm just getting to know them, then I've already had a session to kind of open up their history and get into the deeper waters and make sure that they're a good candidate. And then if they're coming in for their first treatment session with CAP, ketamine assisted psychotherapy, then we oftentimes spend the first 15 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes catching up, setting intentions, asking how they're feeling, any hesitancies, excitements, dreams, energy coming into the space. The ceremony starts as soon as we say yes. It doesn't start as
Mhm.
soon as I offer the ketamine or
Totally.
or we are in circle and we drink the tea. It's already in motion. So I get curious, like what's already rising, take a little bit of a temperature of their inner landscape, and then offer the medicine. And at that point, we start the music, and that music track is an hour. And then we've typically got another 20, 30 minutes on the other side of that to harvest.
Yep.
And sometimes people are just in the zone and so deep and so insulated, and that's just amazing. And I'll let them stay there. And if it feels like they're trying to put words to something in order to fill the void, so to speak, then I'll ask them to just be with the process and let it continue to seep.
Yeah.
And oftentimes people are just so wonderfully away. We've had this experience. We're just all of a sudden insights. Well, I got to share this. Help. I know you're here to help work as my auxiliary memory bank. So let me just download everything that I just experienced and have you auto you know, dictate, so to speak, or auto scribe what my internal experience just was or is. So now I can help them harvest some of the nuggets, and then that typically takes us to the 2 hour point, and then we have the client go to an integration room with a journal. We have a tea and tonic bar, so we have a cup of tea. They've got some downtime, and then we've also got a lot of other stations, right? We have a sauna. We have, which
Nice.
is kind of nice to do a light sauna on the side of just like continuing to open the experience. We have a suite of massage chairs, and then about an hour after the cap session, they'll do a float.
Nice.
And
That's quite the 1, 2, 3. I like
it's
that.
it's a pretty sweet stack. And to see people on the other side, and that's about a 4 hour process, right? Because we have 2 hours in the cap, an hour of integration while they're still landing, and then an hour in the float tank. And it's amazing to see how much can transform in just a 4 hour process.
No doubt.